When I look at what Dr. Robert Hosty did to his patients, I don't just wonder why he was allowed to practice medicine. I wonder why this man was not in prison. This is Christina with the Sisyphean Journal, and today is January 25th. Today, I am not just going to tell you the story. I'm going to take you on a little tour of the medical board documents so you can kind of see what I see and understand some of the frustration that I feel. And today we are looking at the first dead abortion patient, but the second dead patient of Dr. Robert Hosty. And that really raises questions about what the medical board is thinking and why nobody set the police on this guy. Alexandra was a 37-year-old single mom from New Jersey. On January 25th of 2010, she told her family that she was going to a doctor to get treatment for a cyst. Instead, she went to A1 Medicine in Jackson Heights, Queens, for an abortion. She was 16 or 17 weeks pregnant. The abortion was performed at 3:30 p.m. By the end of the day, Alexandra was at Elmhurst Hospital Center, dead from hemorrhage. Her 19-year-old daughter told the New York Daily News, "I'm upset because I never got a chance to say goodbye. She didn't want anyone to go with her. I made dinner and lunch hoping she would come back." Let's jump over to the medical board documents, shall we? So, State of New York Department of Health, State Board for Professional Medical Conduct in the matter of Robert F. Hosty, MD. Let's scroll down, shall we? So, let's just look at some of this. Point 2, respondent currently has no hospital affiliations, and the last time he took any continuing medical education courses was in 2006. Respondent maintains a private office on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn where he sees patients and does general gynecology. Respondent is also an independent contractor for at least 3 offices, including the 2 on Roosevelt Avenue where he treated patients A and B. Respondent continues to perform termination of pregnancy procedures as he did in the care of patient B. This clinic continued to let him work there after what he did to these 2 patients. And if this doesn't make your blood boil, there's something seriously wrong with you. So let's just look at what he did to patient A, and I'm going to kind of skim down really quickly. Patient A was a 41-year-old woman who went to to Hosty on October 26th of 2008 for treatment of an abscess in a gland in her gynecological reason. Now, Hosty didn't perform proper examinations. Surprise, surprise. He didn't document any proper examinations. Surprise, surprise. So let's just scroll down. This talks about he did not take an appropriate history. This talks about proper examination. This talks about lack of a proper examination. This talks about the fact that patient A was on blood thinners, and he did not evidently review her medical history and did not test to see if her blood could clot properly before he performed surgery in an outpatient setting. So there was a certified registered nurse assistant providing anesthesia services at Choice Gynecological Services, and with that name you can kind of tell it's an abortion clinic. But there was no anesthesiologist, so Hosty was the supervising physician. And the medical records are inconsistent with the autopsy results. So the surgery that Hosty documented isn't the surgery he actually performed on patient A. Now, sometime toward the end of the procedure, patient A stopped breathing. The anesthesia record indicates respiratory arrest, intubated, oxygenated, transferred to Elmhurst Hospital via ambulance. Now, that kind of sounds like they moved quickly, right? No! She was intubated, but they didn't perform CPR. They just bagged her. They just kept filling her lungs and letting them empty and filling her lungs and letting them empty and letting her heart sit there not beating. So they talk about what he failed to do. So there's this patient lying there. Her heart's not beating. It took them at least 10 minutes to call 911. EMS was called at 3:07 p.m. The paramedics arrived in 4 minutes. Once at the office, no one identified themselves as doctors. The paramedics thought the person at the head of the bed ventilating the patient, the CRNA, was the doctor. The CRNA reported, "She's dead. She has no pulse." When paramedics asked Hosty if he was a doctor, he said yes. When they asked, "How come you are not doing chest compressions?" he shrugged his shoulders. No one provided any information about the patient, and when respondent was asked if the patient was given medicine, he said no. That's when the CRNA interrupted and talked about the meds the patient had been given. From the time EMS arrived, respondent was not near the patient. EMS stated that respondent did not provide any information or assistance. Patient A was not being monitored with anything other than a pulse oximeter, which is that little clip they put on your finger to chart your pulse and your oxygen saturation, which should have been at least enough to tell them that her heart wasn't beating and she had no oxygen in her blood. So patient A was transported to the hospital and pronounced dead. And they go a bit over how appalling his medical records were. This was October of 2008. This man was still performing medical procedures, including outpatient surgery, in at least 3 facilities. And this abortion clinic, A1 Women's Center in Queens, was letting him do abortions there. Now, of course, the medical board doesn't identify Alexandra by name, but news coverage did. So that's how we know that patient B is Alexandra. She went there on January 25th for a second trimester abortion. So let's scroll down a little bit. There are 2 facts in patient B's past medical history that are significant as they relate to respondent's decision to perform a termination of pregnancy in a non-hospital setting. Patient B had an anterior wall placenta and a history of 2 previous C-sections. And I'm going to let the medical board explain the importance of that. After a C-section, a woman will have scarring on her uterus. In general, the scar area is thinner than the rest of the wall of the uterus. Since patient B had 2 C-sections, each surgery would have been in the same operative field. There is an affinity of placental attachment in patients with previous C-sections to attach in the area where the scar is made, meaning the placenta is just going to latch right on to the thinnest, most fragile part of the uterus. This is important because there's the possibility that since the anatomy is not normal, the placenta will embed itself deeper than it would in a regular pregnancy. So the autopsy confirmed that patient B had placenta incretia. This type of placental invasion is through most of the wall of the uterus and not completely through. And they talk about what a reasonably prudent physician would do, but of course, Hosty was not a reasonably prudent physician, as we can see from what he did and failed to do with patient A, and nobody stopped him. When faced with a medical history of patient B, a reasonably prudent physician should consider whether the facility in which the surgery was planned had the capability to switch emergency from a TOP, termination of pregnancy, to an abdominal exploratory laparotomy if a complication issue such as excessive bleeding occurs. There would have to be blood, cross-match, and transfusion capacity. Okay? Which, of course, was not there because this is a freestanding outpatient abortion clinic. They're not prepared to do transfusions, are they? So on January 25th, 2010, respondent began a D&E, dilation and evacuation, on patient B. That's when they reach in with forceps and pull the baby out in chunks. CRNA Teresa Mitchell was monitoring the anesthesia. So the procedure began at 3:50 p.m. and ended at 3:59 p.m. So he went through this complicated second trimester procedure in only 9 minutes. So the medical record indicates that at the end of the procedure, patient B began to bleed uncontrollably. Under these circumstances, a reasonably prudent physician would need to try to determine the cause of the bleeding and institute resuscitative efforts. In other words, somebody needs to keep her breathing and keep her heart beating while the doctor figures out why she's bleeding so much. In this case, tonics were used to try to control the bleeding, and CRNA Mitchell intubated patient B. So, although CRNA began breathing for the patient, no chest compressions were performed. So, this is a certified nurse anesthetist who does not know to do chest compressions on a patient who has no pulse. And so he did nothing, did not call 911. The medical record indicates that the TOP ended at 3:59 p.m. EMS was called at 4:47 p.m. So roughly 4 o'clock when they finished, roughly 4:45, 45 minutes before it dawned on anybody that you just might want to call an ambulance for this patient whose heart is not beating. While you're standing there begging her, oh, this is fine. The air goes in, the air goes out. Hey, there's two very important aspects to emergency medicine. One, air goes in and out. Two, blood goes round and round. And you have to have both of these going on at the same time. Anybody who's taken a CPR class knows this. And here we have two medical professionals standing there going, well, the air's going in and out. I guess that's good enough. The blood was not going round and round. Where was it going? We shall see. So, paramedics arrived. They saw patient B on the exam table with her legs open. They saw blood on the floor and blood coming from patient B. They also saw bloody clothes in the corner. They noticed that patient B was gray and ashen, meaning that she was likely dead. She was cold to the touch. Paramedics observed a female at the head of the bed ventilating the patient. No one identified themselves as a doctor. EMS assumed that this person was a doctor because she was the one giving them information about what had happened. At no time did respondent offer information or assistance. Respondent may have walked into the room briefly, then left. In fact, on cross-examination, when asked if he recognized the respondent, the paramedic said no, because he had not seen or interacted with the respondent. No one was doing chest compressions. Patient B was not monitored with anything except a pulse oximeter. She was in cardiac arrest. The paramedics started CPR and transported patient B to Elmhurst Hospital, where she was pronounced dead. And then it just goes on for how badly he screwed up, and then talks about another patient whose care he screwed up, but fortunately that patient survived. Are you appalled enough yet? You might get a little bit more appalled because we just put the uncaring cherry on the cake of this. What had happened? He had severed an artery. severed an artery. When the New York Daily News called the clinic to ask about what had happened, the person who answered the phone and would not identify herself said, "The patient was transferred to a hospital. She didn't die at the clinic. Nothing happened here." Kind of reminds me of when Deanna Bell died on the abortion table, and the abortion clinic sent a thank you note to the referring hospital saying, "Uneventful D&E. Dead 13-year-old girl, totally uneventful." People drive me crazy. So go ahead, start a conversation below. What do you think about this whole situation? Why in the world was this man not in jail, much less still having a medical license? Do all doctors who do stuff like that get to keep their licenses? Or outpatient clinics all over the place employing doctors like this? Or, is it abortion clinics just, scraping the bottom of the barrel? Although in this case, it's not even the bottom of the barrel. They had to tip the barrel over and scrape things off the ground underneath it. Let me know what you think.